So Heather, last time I saw you in person, spoke to you, we were at the Brand Builders Group event. I think it was like November or December 2018 in Nashville, and you've had this, I would say, meteoric rise, at least publicly. The book had come out maybe a few months before. You're doing amazingly well on book sales, and you've just been on bigger show and bigger podcast after bigger show and bigger podcast. You've launched your own show, which has been doing incredibly well. Uh, has anything changed in terms of how you view building a thought leadership brand, in terms of managing maybe fans or all this sort of inbound business that you might be dealing with? Or is it sort of same old that you were dealing with in 2018, 2017, or even before the
No,
book came out?
I'm super grateful I invested in myself and in my personal brand 4 years ago when I launched it, because especially now, during pandemic, having that audience that's already there and accessible to you when you need to pivot your business has been a godsend. Leveraging some of the new technologies out there around automation and, really trying to deliver value to that audience it's been fantastic. So I'm so grateful that, I decided to launch my personal brand 4 years ago and really put in that hard work to, create reach and, go on a lot of different shows. And, for a long time, that was a big part of my goal, was just to expand that audience and get a larger audience. And, I've had a lot of success from being on a guest on larger shows, but I've also will say that just LinkedIn alone is you don't even have to be on big shows to grow a sizable audience on LinkedIn. The platform lends itself to it. It's not like Facebook or Instagram where it's so hard to grow an audience. And if you didn't do it 5 years ago, you're screwed. You need to buy an audience there. So I just really have leaned into LinkedIn, and that's been paying big dividends for me.
Bring us back to maybe when you decided that you were going to go all in on building a personal brand. I know for myself, the business comes first, and then I've invested more and more in building my brand as it pertains to building a viable business. But I don't necessarily want to be famous or out there. And I always give people the example that if I had to pick between Tony Robbins and his brand and Peter Diamandis and his brand, I want Peter's brand, because it's Peter is a little less known, but he's still well respected and revered in the industry. They're both best friends, so they have all the same contacts. They're all both of them are doing sort of similar types of business endeavors. But Tony Robbins has maybe millions or tens of millions of people on an email list and social media, and Peter has hundreds of thousands, and they tend to be a little more geeky and scientific and tech focused, whereas Tony has some super smart people, but also some looky-loos, as I call them, and people that are like students or are just going to harass you with all these messages and whatnot. So I've started investing more and more in building my brand, but I've also struggled with, do I go all in? What does that look like for me? So what was it like for you when you decided that this is something you want to spend a lot of time on and really dedicate yourself to?
Yeah, I was still in corporate America at the time. I was a chief revenue officer of a media company, and I'd been working with a charity for about 8 years at that point in time. I'd been on the board of the City of Miami charity, and I was doing that in my free time. And during that free time, I was noticing, wow, I'm in such a bubble in this media world. And these are the only people I deal with. And these are the only events I go to. And now that I was working on this charity and on this board, I was meeting people in all new industries and going to different events. And I was getting asked to speak at different events. And I started realizing the more I stay in this bubble, the more limited I am from a thought perspective, from a contact perspective, a network perspective. I've got to broaden my horizon. And I thought about the analogy that I originally thought of was when I recruit talent, the idea of chasing people down is a poor model. The right idea is to pull people towards you. And the best way to do that is to let people know who you are at scale and share your messages and your information at scale so people can say, wow, that's the kind of leader I want to work for. That's the kind of team I want to be on. And that's what really drove me that time where I was working with the charity a lot. And I just said, you know what, I've got to get beyond this little bubble that I'm living in and start pulling and attracting talent towards me and getting my message out there so people, like-minded people will be drawn to me. And that's when I launched my personal brand. That was 4 years ago. And that was essentially the reason why I ended up getting fired too. I was told to shut the personal brand down because the company I worked for felt very threatened by it. And I knew that I wasn't doing anything wrong. What I was doing was really smart. And it might have been ahead of the curve because at that point in time, not that many C-suite executives, at least in my industry, were doing that. So I was definitely leading the way, ruffling a lot of feathers along the way. And in the end, I asked myself, you know, is what I'm doing wrong? Is it bad? No, it's not. And it's about, you know, letting the world know who I am and sharing my message and getting my information out there to help others. And so I really leaned into it. And the more that they would threaten me and challenge me, I would more aggressively, you know, invest in my brand. So for me, that ended up paying huge dividends because I ended up getting fired 1 year later. So 1 year into launching my personal brand, I lost my job, which was, you know, I've never been anything but promoted. I'm a type A overperformer, overachiever, and that was a major gut punch. So I took that opportunity because I had a non-compete, non-solicit as part of, you know, when I signed on to be the chief revenue officer, I had to sign away my rights to ever compete against the company if we ever parted ways for any reason. So for 12 to 18 months, I couldn't work in the industry where I had my expertise. And so I figured if I'm going to start over and roll the dice on something, why don't I just roll the dice on me and see what it looks like to run my own company? So my trajectory is very different than yours in that, and I understand yours was business first. Mine was, I already had I was in a business and then I launched the brand as a way to just add value and elevate myself. And then it turned out that that was flipping to become my business, but I didn't have any revenue streams. And since sales was my expertise, I just thought, what is the fastest product I could come up with right now to sell to drive revenue? And I thought, you know what, I'll just write a book and I'll self-publish it so I can get it out super fast.
For most people, that's not always like the fastest thing, but it sounds like you were able to write it pretty quickly, or you already knew what you wanted to say because you'd been working on it for so long. And then you just got it out there.
I hadn't been. I went on the Elvis Duran show as a guest, and halfway through the interview, he said, "Oh my gosh, Heather, obviously you're writing a book." And I said, "Obviously," but I wasn't. But in that moment, you know, his confidence in me and his conviction that I should have a book really rang true to me. And I thought, okay, how do you write a book? And I just Googled it, and, you know, basically says you have to be disciplined and write every day. And so I said, well, I'm fired. I have free time. I'll do that. And so I just moved really quickly, got the book done, got the book out. And then suddenly I had a product to sell. So, you know, it was sort of, there was not some big design that this master plan that I was going to have, you know, these specific revenue streams and do this and that. But just, you know, knowing that I wanted to go to work for myself and take this as an opportunity to do something different lent itself to launching my own business.
So this won't be the most creative question you've ever been asked, but I'm going to lead it to something more specific for the Meeting of the Minds crowd in a second. But you obviously talk a lot about building confidence and having confidence and expressing that to power your career. Can you walk us through how you had the confidence to make these major moves? You bet on yourself, knowing full well that could cause issues with your employer. You decided to jump ship anyways. You got yourself on the Elvis Duran show, which isn't anything to sneeze at. That's a pretty big deal. Halfway through a major interview, you're like, oh, a book coming out, and then you go and write it. Your book did really well. So you obviously had confidence in your message too, and in your promotional plan. So how does one build Heather-esque confidence?
It's all about stepping into fear. We're taught as children that, fear, oh my gosh, go home. If you're afraid, run, hide. And for a long time in my career, I was living like that. I would be frustrated in meetings and raise my hand wanting to add someone, and someone will give you a dirty look, and I started getting, okay, well, I'm going to pull back. I'm going to pull back a little bit. I don't want to, upset things here. and really hiding from that fear. And I wasn't growing as a result, and I wasn't living to my potential, right? And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was becoming a watered down version of myself by responding to fear in a negative way, pulling back. Ultimately, it took another woman really treating me very poorly at work. And I decided one day, okay, I'm done with this. This watered down version of me is not working. I'm going to launch my own ad campaign for myself, to create confidence within myself. And I did that, and it happened right before I got fired. And it was perfect timing, because I was really working on creating confidence within me, my own messaging that I was running to myself, not, oh my gosh, be careful, what if you get fired? Instead it was, wait a minute, are you doing good things? Hell yeah, you're doing good things. Are you a positive person helping others? Hell yeah, you are. I'm proud of you. Step into that and shine that light. It's your job to. And the more I would step into that and realize, I would start getting feedback from people from this new personal brand I had launched, saying how much it was helping them, and how much they appreciated it. And I thought, I'm really proud of me, and I'm going to keep stepping into this. And every time I see fear, I'm going to see it as a green light that means go, and go faster. And it has not been easy. People look from the outside in and they'll say, oh, that's worked out for you because of A, B, C, and D. And no, it's because I constantly step into fear, and it does not get easier, right? It's just as hard as it was for me to decide to go to work for myself, as to decide to launch the book, as to decide to launch the podcast, as to decide to give my first TEDx talk, as to decide to launch my coaching business. All these things are scary. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a rookie every time I show up in one of these new roles, but I challenge myself with clarity to see fear as a green light that means go, and go faster.
In the last 4 years, is there what would you say was like the most fearful moment or thing you were planning for, and what were the steps you took to take it head on, overcome it, and then learn from that?
I mean, there's so many, but one that just popped in my head was when I gave my first TEDx back in October of 2019, a few months ago. I've spoken for 20 something years, and speaking is not a big deal for me, but the limitations and the pressure on a TEDx talk, because it's not like a normal, oh, you have 60 minutes and here's a stage and whatever, do you. It's all about, you can't leave the red circle, and it's about the idea, and this is what works and this doesn't work. Everyone's telling you how to be, and I don't really respond well to that. I like to just show up and do my thing. So I had to do my thing differently this time, which is scary, right? And you're like, okay, this is going to be up on the site forever. If I blow it, you can't it's not like you're doing a talk, and if you don't like it, you just don't share it with people. Who cares, right? Move on. But this is something that's going up on this massive site, whether it's good or not, it's going to be there for people to find. And one of the things I've learned is the more you elevate yourself, the more the haters are going to come for you, right? So I just knew, like, oh God, kid, you better make this good. And they cut my time back to 10 minutes. They changed the topic that I was going to give my talk on a month before I was going to speak. So I had all these crazy variables going on, and I just was putting a tremendous amount of pressure on myself to really do a great job. So I practiced a ton, of course. That's one way to create confidence in any situation, right? I went to the venue ahead of time, which I really encourage anyone. If you have something big coming up, an event or something, go put yourself in there in your mind's eye, but also physically. It's very helpful. I shot footage there. I stood on the stage as if I was going up and killing my talk. I really put myself mentally into that mindset of, wow, this is going to be great, and I'm going to rock this, and the crowd's going to be going crazy. And I came back home, and I was practicing, and I took power moments from my talk that I really wanted to slow down around and own. There was 10 of them, and I wrote them on cardboard and stuck them in the condo where I live. And my son thought I was crazy. He's like, why do you have, when you are a threat, you will always be the target on the wall, Mom? Like, what are you doing? And I was like, because Mom I'm a visual learner. And for me, the more I could see those moments, fear is a green light that means go. I knew that I would own those moments on the stage, because it would be a reminder. As soon as I would start saying it, I'd remember the wall, and the wall tells me, slow down and own this moment. So these are just all, tips that I implemented to make sure I was going to perform the way that I wanted to. I also have a playlist that I utilize. It's the playlist of my life, and I'm big into hip hop and thug life music. I know people think that's so crazy, but I've been like that my whole life. So I have this playlist that I've been using. I got fired 3 years ago, and I've been using it since I got fired, and I love it. It's still so good. And it's all my favorite songs that fire me up. So I suggest people create a playlist for themselves, something that it's like Pavlov's law. When you ring the bell, the dog starts salivating. The dog knows, oh, food is coming. So this is what the music does for me. I play the music and all of a sudden I'm saying, oh, I'm about to go kill it somewhere. I'm going to crush this. This is when I'm going to be at my best. So it doesn't matter if I'm in LA, if I'm in Miami, where I am, I shut everything out. I put the headphones in. And when that music starts, it's the only time I listen to it is when I'm going to go do something huge. I know something is about to go fantastic because I trained myself subliminally that to hear the music means you're about to go do phenomenal. Then I use lavender. I always have my lavender with me. And anytime I'm getting nervous or something big is to calm and center myself, I'm also training myself that anytime I'm going to do something big, I smell the lavender. So when I smell the lavender, I know I'm going to do great. So these are all little systems I put in place to train me like a dog or a child that you're about to go, kick butt. I write on the bottom of my shoes, I can and I will. And I always rewrite it that day to remind myself, you are stepping into this. You're walking on I can, I will. That's how strong you are, Heather. And then I surround myself with people that encourage me and, stretch me and remind me of great things right before, just in case I need a pick me up. And I make sure that I have boundaries for any villains that might be around. So anyhow, I go out to the place where I gave my TEDx talk is about an hour and a half away from where I lived. So I slept in my house the night before, drove out to the venue in the morning. They wanted us to do a walkthrough. It was really early. I had like this, my hair in a knot, I wasn't prepared. I wasn't dressed up. I was in sweats. And one of the things that helps me prepare is when I look a certain way, when I dress a certain way, I feel really powerful. I was not in that outfit. I wasn't ready. And they said, hey, Heather, jump up on stage. We want to have you do a dry run through right now. And I wasn't prepared for that. So I thought, okay, weird, but I'll get up there. And there was a lot of people there working, setting up the venue and speakers. I started speaking and one line into my talk, I froze. I wasn't physically prepared and I froze. And the head of the venue and the event started laughing. And he said, oh, Heather, you're so full of it. All right, whatever, that's fine. We got enough audio, you can get off. But I wasn't kidding. I really blinked. He thought I was kidding and I wasn't. I went to get off the stage. My heart was racing. I started sweating. I was freaking out. And a woman said to me, I have a friend that made it to the NFL and he had his one big kick and he blew it, sort of just like what you did right there. And I wanted to knock that lady out, but I didn't. Instead, I said, that is not helpful. And in fact, I will be leaving and I will see you later. And I walked out of the venue, which I wasn't supposed to do, but I knew at that point in time, I had to get away from people that might put more negativity or pressure on me and get around people that would lift me up. I wanted to go get my hair done. I wanted to get dressed in my clothes. I wanted to smell my lavender. I wanted to listen to my music. I wanted to look at my notes. And I went and did that. And I was getting ready and I had two friends there and they were saying, okay, remember this event. Remember when the AC went out and you got nervous, but you killed it. And remember this and remember this. And we started talking about all the crazy things that have happened. Like one time when I was giving a speech at the Guggenheim in New York and someone passed out and knocked a whole table out during the speech. And I had to keep going. And we started laughing about all the crazy things that could happen, but how I've always made it through. So I started calming down and feeling better. And then I started looking better and pulling myself together. And then we went to the venue and we got there and I was the first speaker and they had me in the background and they said, okay, Heather, we're ready to call you out. Are you ready? And I was petrified. I just thought if I go out there and choke one line in, oh my God, I'm gonna have to live with this on TED for the rest of my life. This is gonna suck. And so I said to myself, I closed my eyes. I was all mic'd up, all ready to go. They're calling me and I closed my eyes and I just said, if you don't walk out there right now, you will never forgive yourself. If you walk out there right now and blow it, I'm gonna be so proud of you. And I took the pressure off myself and I walked out. And I started the talk and the talk started okay. And I was so nervous. Only I know that watching, but there's something that I do in the talk that's very funny. I duplicate a line in my talk. I say it twice. The reason why I did that is that's where I tripped up in the morning and froze. So I started freezing and I felt myself start freezing just from the mistake I made in the morning, right? I was just like duplicating what I had done earlier, which was my biggest fear. And somehow I just got myself to say the same line again. And if you watch the talk now, you'll see where I almost lost it. And then I was able to keep going. And that was probably one of the scariest things. And then the talk got promoted to TED last month or 2 months ago, and it got translated to 5 languages, and it's doing really well.
And only you know that that was like the mistake that you made on your script, which happened to me as well. When I did TED at IBM in 2015, I can point to a part of the talk where I didn't meet my own standards or my own rehearsal, but no one knew. And then there was also a time in the talk where this was in San Francisco, and I was living in New York at the time. But I actually saw a friend in the crowd like halfway through the talk, and like we like locked eyes kind of, and I didn't know that she was going to be there. And so like I could point to the exact moment of the talk where I kind of like smiled and like you like noticed for like half a second and sort of stopped. But no one knows that either. Right. And so you brought up so much gold there in terms of how you prepare. You know, I can remember preparing for my talk, and if someone saw me preparing, they would think I was nuts. I mean, we also worked with the TED team, and they had me like do 11 different drafts of the talk, and I was working with 2 different coaches, and it was just a pretty crazy process. But then the week of the talk, as I'm sort of trying to hammer it in, I was jumping up and down in my hotel room, and I was listening to Drake and Future because their mixtape had just come out, and I was listening to it at like full blast with a TV in the background in the hotel room while trying to say my talk 2 or 3x speed, and just like picking it up at different points in the talk. And I'm like you, I don't script my talks ever. Like when I do keynotes or events, I just show up and I talk, and occasionally I'll have some slides to guide me, but I don't like to script it. But this was like the only time I scripted it because the TED team wanted me to. And so it made for a great speech. So there is a method to the madness. But I think what you shared is gold. Having the playlist is an amazing idea. And it's good to hear that you go to such lengths to make sure that you're not going to fail, because at least for me, and I'm sure for others listening in, these are things that I'm starting to build for myself. But you're a top performer, and you're doing all these things to make sure that you don't fail. And so, like, why can't we take the same protocols and precautions in place? Whether it's getting a certain amount of sleep, the way you dress, the writing your own version of writing on your shoes, lavender. Like I think having so many fail safes is a great idea, and just making sure that you're gonna get yourself to the level of performance that you expect. There's a lot of goodies in there.
Yeah, I'll tell you, success is no accident, right? Like I look back and over my career, people say, how did you get to the C-suite? Oh, that wasn't by accident either. It was constantly pitching myself for advancement. Like there is a recipe to success, and it's freaking hard work.
Yeah, like if you looked at how much LeBron works out and what he eats and how much he spends on his body, like it's no wonder that he never gets injured and that he's 35 and hopefully going to win an NBA championship this year. And
in a bubble.
What's that?
In a bubble.
In a bubble, yeah. Just a quick note on TEDx talks specifically. You did TEDx Boca Raton, I believe. Shout out to Boca. Yes. It's my hometown. If you're thinking about doing a TEDx talk, make sure you vet the organizers and sort of understand what they're going to have you do, because all the TEDx events are different. I've done a couple of TEDx talks as well, and the level of organization there versus the TED event, it could be totally hit or miss. So make sure if you are going to accept a TEDx invitation that you know what they're going to expect of you. You could potentially ask other speakers from their TEDx event, like the TEDx Boca Raton 2014 and 2017 speakers, how it went. That might help you in your preparation, because I know a lot of people watching this are considering TEDx talks, or maybe have been invited. But there's a huge difference between how they're going to prepare you or what they're going to expect. And as Heather was sharing, like, it may or may not screw you up. And so you want to make sure they're going to be on your side.
To that point, a good friend of mine, Amy Morin, who's got one of the most viewed TED Talks out there, she had that situation which you're describing, which is she had applied to a bunch of different, TEDx venues to just, trying to get out there, of course, because like me, she wasn't invited, she was hustling. And so she had landed a couple of different opportunities. So she took them. She did the same talk on 2 different venues, and the quality of the recording, she was great in both of them, but the quality was so poor in one of them, no one even ever saw it. And then she did the same talk somewhere else with better quality, and she has millions and millions of views. So yeah, it's really important to make sure that you're with a good quality team.
Yeah, and just one more thing on the TEDx front. So back when I was doing my TED talk, I was also like super pumped backstage, like nervous, but kind of felt ready. And there was 2 different speakers that bombed that day, and one right before me too. And so again, I think what you share is, as far as preparation and getting yourself in the right mindset, having the right people around you, having your go-tos, whether it's a playlist or a scent or something like that. I think just helps you whenever you are facing adversity to just sort of brush it off or get past it. Because thankfully I wasn't deterred by the fact that someone bombed right in front of me. I just went up, and I wasn't as prepared as you. I can only imagine, if I had those various things to fall back on, it would be even easier. I want to switch gears to maybe confidence and balancing that with making sound strategic decisions. So it's one thing when you're building this personal brand. I don't know how much risk there is, and maybe there's like emotional risk in like writing a book and having people hate it, or maybe wasting your time. But there's less downside per se than maybe a big business decision where I'm going to give it vaguely as my own example, but like I have meeting in the minds right now. I have a pre-existing business, certain amount of cash to deploy in growing the business. And there's been some opportunities that have come up for me recently that would require a lot of capital, a lot of time. And, it's not necessarily something I'm an expert at, but I do have access to experts who can help me. It is a very exciting opportunity. And I do think very, long-term, it could be a very strategic decision to make. But I also see that there is the possibility for failure, and that I could be spinning my wheels, and that maybe I should just focus on growing the pre-existing business as opposed to doing like basically a second and third business, or maybe, like a second shiny object sort of thing. So how do you balance having confidence in whatever decision you make and just going for it with really assessing whether or not you should be taking an opportunity and making the right decisions, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. And Jared, just so you know, I've failed at so many businesses since I went out on my own. I mean, I came up with the idea to partner with Perry Ellis International and launch a clothing line, and we were going to take it to HSN, and I was going to sell millions of products for them on air, and we were going to make millions. And that entire initiative took 9 months to come to fruition and actually have the deck done and go for the pitch meeting. And when we got there, they said, Heather, we love you. Product line's crap. We can't take it. And so literally in an instant, 9 months of work evaporated, and it was still a great idea and we still loved it, but we didn't want to go back to, ground zero and create a whole new line. We just didn't see that it was going to be worthwhile. I partnered with a skincare company to launch a skincare line that never got off the ground. I mean, I could tell you so many examples of failed businesses that in theory are great ideas and align perfectly with me and with, my audience and should have worked, but they didn't. But you don't know unless you try. And, some of the best things, like I didn't know I was going to get into the speaking business. I didn't even know people got paid for speaking. I only found that out when I Googled, how do you sell books? And it said speak. And I thought, oh, easy, I can do that. And then I started getting offered to get paid, which completely changed what my business model was going to be. So sometimes, in my opinion, just stepping into it is the way that you start figuring it out, but you're not going to figure it out if you're always on the sidelines looking in saying, oh, should I go do that or not? That's a waste of time. Don't let, things like that derail you. I say either move forward and start seeing if there's value, because once you do that, things will either start coming together or you'll start getting red flags and saying, I don't have the right gut feel on this one.
I've been trying to approach it with openness, but also I try to be strategic and de-risk it as much as possible, and make sure that I'm not going to lose my shirt by going after a different opportunity.
I mean, at some point, you're not going to be able to de-risk it. So you're
Right.
either going to decide, and I would just check in with yourself. You're the one that's going to have the answer. Is, what do I really think? And when you were just talking about the idea, I could see you were like all lit up that you really like whatever it is, So as long as you feel that way and you keep feeling that way.
Is that a false sense of excitement because it's fresh and new and it's the shiny object? Or could that be distracting? Yeah, I mean, it is exciting. I have started exploring it, but I imagine other people are going to be in that same boat where they're like, oh, I could take 20, 30, 40, 50% of the capital we have and go after this opportunity. And, if it fails, I'm not going to die, but it's going to be really bad. And if it succeeds, then awesome,
Well, what I would say is keep going down this path that you're going down and keep checking in with yourself and saying, how do I feel about this? Hang on, let me reassess this. How am I feeling about it? Because, there's going to be risk. That's it. There's no greatness. There's no major success. There's no innovation without risk. And the more you listen to yourself and trust yourself, the more confidence you have in yourself, the more certainty you have in yourself, the more clear you'll get that the risk is minimal in that I trust in me. I have confidence in me. I'll figure a way to make something work out of it. I'll learn something from this. I'll pivot it. I'll find something of value and a way to, create revenue, or I won't get in too far till, I'll know when I'm realizing the dots aren't connecting here. So, trust yourself and keep taking those steps moving forward. And the reality is, you're going to have to deal with risk.
Maybe a nuanced question, but do you have a specific way in which you check in with yourself, or a certain process that you go through?
Well, first of all, one of the best pieces of advice I can give anyone is don't ask for directions from people who haven't been to where you're going, right? And that's the biggest mistake people make. So they'll ask their mother and they're going to ask their brother, and should I start a company in pandemic? No, that sounds terrible. Oh my gosh, don't quit your 9-to-5. You're lucky you have a check. I hear about these conversations all the time. Your mother's a stay-at-home mother and she's scared for you. She cannot give you good business advice. Do not ask someone how to get out of a ditch if they've never been in one. That is just crazy to me. And that derails more dreams and more advancement of business than you can imagine. So really become aware of who you're asking for help and advice. I'm dealing with a wonderful young woman right now that wants to start her own business, but her parents keep telling her it's too scary. They're both in 9-to-5 jobs and they don't want her to get hurt and they're afraid for her. But what she's missing is she has this huge business opportunity in front of her. She's so freaking talented and so smart. And if she would just make the leap, she would explode, but she'll never know if she doesn't make the leap. So it's a decision that you have to acknowledge, who am I seeking the advice from? And are these qualified people? So that's really, really important in any situation, like something like this.
Are they qualified? And also, what's the lens in which they're, giving you advice? So, when I decided that I was going to take a gap year from college and then took a second gap year and then never went, I was getting similar things. Like my parents were giving me certain advice, but, their lens was, we want to protect Jared and we want to, have him do what we think is right, but they also have a societal viewpoint and a generational viewpoint, and a little bit of what are other parents going to think of me if he doesn't go to university or if he doesn't go to a good university. And that was especially true of my grandparents. They're like they're viewing it all, not, this is going to sound terrible, but part of them was viewing it as, what are my friends going to say at the country club if I tell them that my grandson didn't go to school? And so I had to make my own decision, and part of that was because I just took the temperature of where everyone was coming from, and what lens they were giving this advice. And so even same in the business world, like you're going to have a lot of people that are well-meaning and sort of trying to give you great mentorship, but there might also be people giving you advice with not the best intent, or trying to lead you in a certain way so they can sell you on something, or they may just be giving you advice, but they don't have expertise in that arena. Or maybe they were successful 20 years ago, but the game's changed. Like there's so many different things to think about. So that's really great advice. Let's switch gears to how you're viewing parenting, because I hope to start a family in the next few years. I definitely want to raise entrepreneurial kids and high integrity kids and all that. Do you see the opportunities for your own? I think you have one son, or you've.
I have one son.
So for your son, do you see that entrepreneurial spark there? Do you want to impart that sort of confidence and gusto? And if so, what are you doing in order to try and create that environment where he's going to do that? And if not, how do you hold yourself back from like trying to shake his shoulders and be like, go start the lemonade stand, and like go and break out on your own? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
I don't feel like that. I'm more concerned with him with being who he is, right? And not taking direction from other people. He's 13 now, so he's not a little baby, and he's at this age, he knows what he likes. And while I know not all parents parent this way, I'm big into, I want him to feel safe within himself. I want him to feel secure within himself. And for me, the best way to do that is when he says, Mom, I want to dye my hair blonde and shave the sides. I say, oh, okay, let's do it. That's your hair. Rock you. You go do you, whatever that is. And he went through a phase where he was wearing black all the time. I can't stand it, but you know what? Hey, that looks great. Like, okay, whatever you want to do. So, not making it that this is how everything has to be done. But if you really enjoy doing this and that's a little different than other people, that's okay. That's what makes you special. And we went away a couple weeks ago to the Keys, and he wanted to drive a jet ski and have me on the back instead of me driving the jet ski. And I was petrified because it's scary, the idea of putting a child behind, a jet ski, and you could get hurt, and then I'm allowing it. And he said, Mom, just trust me. And I thought, okay, this is one of those big moments where you can try to give them a little more than you feel comfortable with, and see that, they can trust themselves. And we did it, and he did a great job, and he was responsible and paid attention. And when I would say like, okay, that's fast enough, Mom's nervous, he would pull back. And I talked with him after. I said, I really want you to know that not only did I trust you, but I could tell you trusted you, which was the most important thing that we can always have, is the right answer. The right thing to do. You didn't need the man to tell you to slow down. You knew to slow down. And he said, yeah, I know, I trust me, but you were screaming like you didn't trust me. So it was kind of funny, but it's the same way that when he comes home and had a fight with a friend, and he'll say, Mom, I don't know why he's doing this to me. I just don't feel good inside. And I'll say, okay, the way that you feel, is that the way that good friends want you to feel? And he says, no. I'm like, okay, so let's think about, always notice how you feel. And that can drive, maybe we shouldn't spend time with people that when we leave, we feel really bad about things. That doesn't sound really positive to me. Why don't you try to communicate with him and see if you still feel that way? And so to me, I'm all about trying to get him to listen to himself, trust himself, and acknowledge how he's feeling around different people and different things, so he gets steered towards the right things for him.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's almost like you're coaching him and asking those open-ended questions, and having those like feedback or retrospective moments after the jet ski. Like, okay, we just had this shared experience. What's your take on it? What did we learn? I think that's really interesting. Have you, obviously we were talking before we went live about navigating parenting during a pandemic and then handling work. rather than going to the negatives of what that looks like and going back to school and not going back to school, managing work and the health dilemma. Um, what opportunities are you seeing for your son, or maybe for you and your son, and how you relate with this new environment? Like, is this an opportunity to help him redirect his energy elsewhere entrepreneurially, or what sort of teaching moments are you seeing right now with your son during this time?
Well, it's important to ask for what you need. And so, some days I have really stressful days and I tell him, okay, here's what mom needs today. We're a team. We've got to approach it like a team. And when you need something, you tell me. And the other day he said to me, Mom, I need something to make me feel special today because I've been supporting you by being quiet all day while you work. And I said, okay, what's something that will make you feel special? He said, pizza. And so sometimes it's like little things, but for him to acknowledge, like, I'm playing a great role here and a great part, and I need you to be too, so that's been interesting. And really we're spending so much more time together than we ever have before.
Yeah, and that seems so simplistic. And I imagine that could also translate to how you would handle like a relationship with a significant other, maybe with two people working from home when they're not normally used to that, or just spending more time together. Um, you know, when it's not always that easy, or when you and your son are not always on the same page, how do you get to bring it back to a more sane place of negotiation and teamwork? So on the days where you guys are just butting heads um, and not communicating as amazingly as you just described, how do you navigate that?
I mean, typically that's probably because someone needs a hug, right? If you're arguing, like there's some misunderstanding or, lack of communication. So typically one thing I've learned with children is they probably just need some love or need some support, that I can try to, come here, something must be bothering you. Come give me a hug. Come talk to me for a minute. Just let me hold you for a minute. That's always my go-to first thing, is to let him know that he's loved no matter what, and that we'll get through this together. Things are temporary, what we're working through right now. I know it's not ideal. I know you don't like being in the house all the time. Mom doesn't either. However, if I had to be locked up with anyone, I'm grateful I'm locked up with you, and trying to talk through those tough moments. Cause yeah, they're here.
Outside of home life, what have you spent more time on in the pandemic for work, and how has that impacted the business that you're building behind your brand, behind the book? Because again, the book did really well, and it's opened up all these opportunities for you, and some of them haven't worked out. As you described, some of them are working out really well. Something like speaking, which I imagine you were doing a ton of before the pandemic, that sort of is coming to a screeching halt, and hopefully we'll come back in 21 or 22 and be better than ever. But where have you redirected your attention in the meantime?
Yeah, the first thing that I did was think to myself, okay, what are things that people ask me for that I haven't had the time to deliver for them? And I used to get DMs all the time saying, do you do coaching? Do you offer mentoring? And I was gone so much because of speaking engagements and my podcast. I wasn't available to do that. So I thought, okay, I'm going to launch a virtual mentoring program. I'm going to launch executive one-on-one coaching. And that's what I've spent the majority of my time doing, is marketing that to my existing audience, and letting them know that this is now something that I'm offering it and I'm doing, building up testimonials and social proof on that, figuring out ways to optimize and become more efficient, figuring out ways to connect, whether it be my Shopify site to, Zapier to PayPal, like trying to find ways so that I'm not doing so much hand holding of the work along the way, so that I can spend my time doing, adding value to people and coaching them, but really trying to find ways to automate and be more efficient on the process to get there. That's really what I've spent the majority of my time in pandemic doing.
Like what works with you, and what sort of, are you working with small business owners and entrepreneurs? Is it more corporate types? Who was an ideal client for you, and what's the process of working with them like?
Yeah, so I have a group mentoring program and then I have an individual program. So those are very different. In my individual one-on-one executive coaching, it's mostly CEOs or SVPs, people who are leading large teams of people and who are looking whether to diversify revenue streams, how to oversee sales in general. This is really leaning on, my expertise around revenue generation and my past track record running a large company. There's a lot of, how can we diversify your revenue streams, pivot your business, and or elevate your team and connect your team during pandemic, because that's a lot of the challenges that leaders are having right now, is that employees are feeling extremely disconnected. So we've launched a few different employee recognition programs and, work to implement some KPIs that the leaders can really evaluate to stay connected and offer feedback in different ways. So looking at different ways to really support their businesses during this unique time. But on the group program, it's such a diverse group. I have a stay-at-home mom who wants to become an entrepreneur. I have, there's so many different people, someone who just graduated college and looking to get a job. And there's a CEO in that group program too, of a tech company. There's a cybersecurity person. So it's all people who really want to go to the next level, hold themselves accountable, and not feel like they're alone doing it.
Where can we learn more about that? Because I imagine, probably going to your website, it'll pull us in all the directions. We can check out the podcast, check out the book, check out all these programs.
You got it. It's at heathermonahan.com or on any of my social media at Heather Monahan.
And what's like the one thing you would want a meeting of the minds-esque individual to do after listening to this? So we're like 40 something minutes into this conversation. What's the call to action? What's the next step above and beyond, checking out your website?
Step into your fear, whatever it is. Choose to see fear as a green light that means go, and get moving now.
Cool. Well, I'll leave it at that, and really appreciate your time, and hope to see you in person soon and get back to Florida myself. And yeah, be safe. Thanks so much. Thank your son for being quiet so we can have our conversation today. And yeah, I look forward to sharing this. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Jared. Good to see you.